Hello everyone, I'm Monsignor Dempsey. I've been teaching in our Liturgical Institute for about 15 years, a course called Liturgical Documentation and Law, about all of the Church's regulations and norms concerning the proper celebration of the Mass and the other sacraments of the Church. Our sessions today and the next 5 hours we have together was originally a course that's a 2-hour semester credit course. So what we're going to do is, obviously we're not going to cover everything. What we'll try to do is cover the highlights, the things that are probably most important. So when we're talking about liturgical law or any kind of law at all, the first question that can arise practically is, what is my attitude towards the law? What is my response? What is, especially in my own conscience as I stand before God, what is expected of me? When I was a kid, the catechism that we used to use in those days had, under the treatment of the fourth commandment, would always have a question. It was, what is the fourth commandment? To honor your father and mother. And then another question was, does the fourth commandment oblige us to respect and to obey others besides our parents? And the answer that we were all taught to give was, besides our parents, the fourth commandment obliges us to respect and obey all our lawful superiors. That meant both civil and ecclesiastical. So where would the catechism get that kind of an idea? Well, actually, it comes from divine revelation. It comes from sacred scripture. This is what St. Paul wrote in the 13th chapter to Romans. Let every person be subordinate to the higher authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority opposes what God has appointed, and those who oppose it will bring judgment upon themselves. Therefore, it is necessary to be subject not only because of the wrath, but also because of conscience. And so, according to St. Paul, all authority, legitimate authority, ultimately comes from God, and therefore we obey legitimate authority out of obedience to God. And how does that apply to the Church? Well, we know the Church was established by Christ. And the Second Vatican Council, in its Constitution Lumen Gentium on the Church, said that the Church has been equipped with all necessary institutions and powers necessary to guide us on our pilgrim way to the fullness of the kingdom. And of course, that includes pastors who have the authority to give direction and formation and guidance. And that includes, of course, the sacred liturgy. And in fact, we see from the very beginning already little hints of that in Scripture itself. So in St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, he's correcting them. He says, the way you're acting and preparing yourself for the Eucharist isn't proper. You're turning this into a drunken orgy, and that's not right. You should examine your conscience before you approach this sacrament and see that you are properly disposed. And we see very early on in the first centuries already the liturgy taking a formal, definitive kind of structure that will be gradually fleshed out over more time. So we come down now to our own time. The catechism that was promulgated by St. John Paul II has several things to say about this matter. In paragraph 2037, it says, the law of God entrusted to the Church is taught to the faithful as the way of life and truth. Therefore, the faithful have the right to be instructed in divine saving precepts that purify judgment and with grace heal wounded human reason. And, the Catechism says, they have the duty of observing the constitutions and decrees conveyed by the legitimate authority of the Church. Even if they concern disciplinary matters, these determinations call for docility in charity. So we have is kind of a little more elaborate exposition of what was already in the older catechism that people my age and older had to learn when we were kids. In 2039, the catechism goes on to say, the conscience of each person should avoid confining itself to individualistic considerations in its moral judgments. As far as possible, conscience should take account of the good of all, as expressed in the moral law, both natural moral law, and revealed, the divine positive law, and consequently also in the law of the Church, and the authoritative teaching of the magisterium on moral questions. Personal conscience and reason should not be set in opposition to the moral law or the magisterium of the Church.